Hello, welcome to our second video on how to build effective teams. I hope you were able to look at the video last week on principle number 1, which is defining a common purpose for your team. That's the first principle that we have in building an effective team, and we want to go through 6 principles, and they'll each be a short video that you can watch on your own, 8 to 10 minutes at a time, or you can watch them back to back and put them all together. And this is part of our training. We have new teams that are forming in October, and we're going to have a time of training then, but we thought we would kick it off with these 6 short videos on how to build an effective team. And I wanted to start each video with kind of a rationale or why we want to build effective teams. Someone may be sitting out there thinking, well, the pastor runs the church, or the staff runs the church, or we just do what they say or do what the pastor says. And actually, there are very solid biblical principles that talk about each and every one of us, each and every one of you are extremely important and valuable in God's kingdom economy, God's kingdom work. Last week we read Romans 12 that talked about that principle. This week I want to read to you out of 1 Corinthians chapter 12. 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verses 12 through 26. This is what Paul wrote to the church at Corinth. For just as the body is one and has many parts, and all the parts of that body, though many, are one body, so also is Christ. For we were all baptized by one Spirit into one body, whether Jews or Greeks, whether slaves or free, and we were all given one Spirit to drink. Indeed, the body is not one part, but many. If the foot should say, because I'm not a hand, I don't belong to the body, it is not for that reason any less a part of the body. And if the ear should say, because I'm not an eye, I don't belong to the body, it is not for that reason any less a part of the body. If the whole body were an eye, where would the hearing be? If the whole body were an ear, where would the sense of smell be? But as it is, God has arranged each one of the parts in the body just as He wanted. And if there were all the same part, where would the body be? As it is, there are many parts, but one body. The eye cannot say to the hand, I don't need you. Or again, the head can't say to the feet, I don't need you. On the contrary, those parts of the body that are weaker are indispensable. And those parts of the body that we consider less honorable, we clothe these with greater honor, and our unrespectable parts are treated with greater respect, which our respectable parts do not need. Instead, God has put the body together, giving greater honor to the less honorable, so that there would be no division in the body, but that the members would have the same concern for each other. So if one member suffers, all the members suffer with it. If one member is honored, all the members rejoice with it. And so we see there's a good, valid biblical principle about all of the members of the body of Christ coming together to work together, coming together to unite and to be a part of God's body. And we may have different gifts, we may have different personalities, we may be totally different people, but we can all come together in the unity of Christ to work for Him and to build up His kingdom. And so that's the principle behind building effective teams. There's a biblical principle behind that. And so we want to honor that biblical principle, that biblical idea, and build effective teams. And so last week's video, as I said, was having a common purpose, having a goal that each team works toward. The second principle that we're going to be talking about in this video this week is having clear roles. Having an idea of where you're going so that each member on the team can have an understanding of their job, of what they need to do. And so it's interesting, if I were doing this like the training that I went to when I got this training, the leader would draw on a whiteboard and he would draw this picture of a boat. I'll ask you to imagine it. If there were 6 people sitting in a rowboat, 2 per row, and they were all paddling in different directions. Some were paddling forward, some were paddling backwards, some were just having the paddle in the water, some were paddling at all. Where would the boat go? The boat would maybe just spin in a circle and go nowhere. Well, that's kind of the idea behind people on a team. If people have their own ideas of where to go, if they have their own ideas of what to do, then pretty much the team is just going to go nowhere and spin in a circle, as it were, like in that idea that I asked you to think about? Well, that's what we don't want on a team. And so we want to talk about clear roles and a clear direction for each and every one of our teams. Let me just add, maybe you're thinking, well, what teams are you talking about? So our ministry teams, our women's ministry, men's ministry, youth ministry, children's ministry, early childhood ministry. Those are some of our more obvious gender and age graded ministries that we have. We have a hospitality team. We have a greeting team. We have teams in our church, and perhaps you saw the graphic that Samantha put up in last week's video, and she'll put it up in this week's video as well, talking about all the teams in our church. Every one of those teams go through these principles. And so this principle number 2, clear roles, is so that we can all be rowing in the same direction. So here's some things. Very easy, very simple, but these are things that we need to ingrain in our hearts and think about in our heads as we think about this second principle and clear roles. Each team member needs to know what is expected of them. Number 1, every person is valuable and equal on the team. And that's an important principle to understand. Every person is valuable and equal on the team. It doesn't matter if someone has been at the church for 10 years or 12 years and you just got to the church last year and you're on a team and you feel like, oh, my voice is not as important as someone else's voice on the team. Not true. That everyone sits on that team, equal voice. Everyone is the same. And that's how we want to build effective teams. That's how we want to move forward together and all row together. Nobody gets more of a say than somebody else. Now that's important for us to understand because personalities are different. Some personalities, like mine, like to talk a lot and sometimes can talk a lot in a team meeting and kind of take over the tenor of the conversation. Other people, just as valuable and just as wonderful, are more quiet and they don't do a lot of talking. And sometimes they kind of seem like they get put on the second row or don't get heard as much. And we want to be careful that that doesn't happen on a team. Everyone is equal. Everyone is of equal value on a team, and we need to remember that. Every voice is important. And so we need to put that in the fabric of our thinking, in the fabric of our heart, and learn to do that if we want to have effective teams. So every person is valuable and equal. Every voice is important. There is no dumb question. Don't ever think there is a dumb question if you're sitting on the team. If you don't understand something and it seems obvious to everyone else but not obvious to you, ask it anyway. It's an important thing. You'll be surprised at how many times someone who's sat on a team for 2-3 years go, you know, that's a good question. I'm glad you asked that. I never would have thought to ask that myself. But no question is a dumb question. Ask to clarify everything that you do, because that is an important thing to remember. One of the things that we need to understand for clear roles on a team, moving forward all together in that little rowboat all together, is that if tasks are assigned, if people say, hey, we're going to do this event at the church and we need someone to check on setting up tables, we need someone to check on the speaker coming in, we need to check on people greeting at the door, and tasks that are assigned, those are important things to be done, right? Every task assigned needs to happen. It needs to take place. One of the things that keeps the rowboat rowing in circles, right, is to come back at the next meeting and people go, oh, I forgot to do that. Oh, I forgot that I was supposed to. Let's remember, tasks that are assigned are very important so that we can keep moving forward and keep going forward. And that's an important thing. So very simple, right? Very commonsensical, but very, very important. Each person is valuable and equal on the team. Every voice is important. No question is a dumb question. And tasks that are assigned are important to the functioning of the team. And those are very simple, basic ideas, but this will help us to understand clear roles on a team and keep us moving forward. Just a couple of quick things to end up this video number 2 on clear roles. Every team should know its place in the structure of the whole church. Some of you may be familiar with this idea of silos. There should be no silos in the church. What do I mean by that? Well, it's like this. I'm gonna pick on the women's ministry because they're a wonderful ministry and they're a very strong ministry in our church. And my wife Becky, she helps lead that, and so I'll hear it from her, I'm sure. But so the women come together and they have Bible study, and they have fellowship, and they have missions things to do, and they pick up money to do some things, and right. So it very easily could be seen as a ministry that encompasses a lot of things that the church as a whole does. The church has a missions team, the church has a fellowship strategy, the church has a lot of things that it's doing, and the women's ministry kind of mirrors all of that. And sometimes a woman can feel like, I don't need to be involved in the church because my ministry and the women do all of that anyway. We don't want that to happen. We don't want one ministry to become just as important as the church. No silos. Now, that doesn't happen in our women's ministry because Becky and all the leadership, they're very careful to say, hey, the church is important, worship is important, and so we want to continue that and keep that from happening, but we don't need silos in the church. We don't need one area to take the place of all the others. I think last week in the video I talked about a Sunday school department at our sponsor church and how that became a church service for people, so they wouldn't even go to the worship service. They just went to Sunday school because it happened just the same as the worship service. Took up an offering, had announcements, talked about a social gathering coming up in a couple of weeks. All of the things that happen in church happen in their Sunday school. That's a silo, and we don't want that to happen. So, thank you so much. A little bit to think about. Principle number 1, find a common purpose, the common purpose for your team. I referenced that first video that we did last week. Purpose number 2, clear roles. The strategy for cooperation, understanding the clear roles that we have on each and every team. Thank you for listening. I look forward to doing video number 3 next week, and I hope you'll join me for that. God bless.